Voice Africa.
Good day, Africa. Good day, world. Welcome to State of the Nation broadcast on One Voice Africa TV. And yes, today in State of the Nation's broadcast, we'll be doing it remotely. And guess who is our guest today? Our one and only Professor Chris Mustapha Nwaokobia Jr. Of course, for those of you who don't know him, you can Google him out. He's a fantastic political analyst, a strong Nigerian, the convener of Country First. And trust me, he's going to open your eyes to a lot about Nigeria today. And so a lot of Nigerians are crying out there that the economy is not favoring them. The price of food stock is going up in the market and that the economy is not friendly to the everyday Nigerian. And so today, I'm bringing him on board to shed a light to what is going on in Nigeria. And so I'm going to go straight to Professor Chris Mustapha Nwaokobia. Over time, we've seen you criticize the excesses of this government. Apart from President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who else do you have? Or who would you think should be the president of Nigeria come 2027? I think this is about the fastest Nigerian has started talking about the polls already. And this shows a measure of frustration by Nigerians. Who do you think should be the next president of Nigeria, apart from our commander-in-chief himself?
I think that the politics of 2027 is pregnant deep and a bit on the complex side. I think that 2 years into Tinubu's term, it's a bit too early to predict who the next president will be. But I also believe that having begun the politics of 2027 pretty early, and here I'm talking about President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, having started the campaign pretty early, with a gale of defections, with contrived decamping and cross-carpeting to the ruling party, the APC. I think that there's a whole lot of challenge before the Nigerian electorate. There's a lot of challenge before the electoral umpire. And then there is monstrous challenge before the political class. The questions are manifold. How do we, just 2 years into Tinubu's tenure, contend with the fact that Mr. President has left governance, has left performance, and is politicking? How do we juxtapose it with the fact that since 1999 we haven't seen campaigns start so early? We haven't seen this kind of defections and endorsements mid-tenure. And so I do sincerely believe that that is why across the country you have a ruling party celebrating the gale of defections, and then you have opposition parties networking, coalescing, and working towards the formation of a coalition to unseat what I call a rather nostalgic, a rather uneventful, a rather unserious administration. And I say this advisedly. What we have is so much noise on paper, like what Shakespeare would say, so much sound, so much noise in the air, sound of fury signifying nothing. You hear government tell you that they are doing projects here and there, and you ask yourself, how does these projects affect the ordinary man? You know, if you have skyscrapers and there's no security, how does a project affect the ordinary man? If you have projects everywhere in Abuja and people can't come outside to use them on account of insecurity, how does it affect the nation? And then if you look at, interestingly, the president admitted in one of his outings that he's perhaps one of the most cursed, most harassed, and most denigrated president. And then he went further to say that you can curse him for all you care, that he will continue to do what he's doing. And it obviously means that he's largely removed from reality. It also means that he's ensconced by court jesters who will never tell him the truth. We haven't had a presidency this uneventful. We haven't had a presidency this uncaring of the masses of the people. We haven't had a presidency so removed from a reality. They will tell us they have taken hard and harsh decisions to reset the country, to reset the economy. And you ask yourself, these hard and harsh decisions, how have they affected the masses of our people? And then I tell you, very importantly, that what you observe is the fact that they will tell you that the removal of subsidy has increased the allocation that goes to the states and the local government. Nobody is frank enough to juxtapose it with the true value of the naira. 2 years ago, the minimum wage was 30,000 naira, now 70,000 naira. 2 years ago, that 30,000 naira could buy much more than 70,000 naira could buy today. That's the death blow of inflation on our currency. And then you ask yourself also, if the country is making more money, why are you borrowing more? We haven't seen our nation under such huge and humongous debt burden like we have today. And so when you look at these realities, you can understand why this presidency is quick to campaigning rather than governing. Because obviously the scorecard is poor. So they must give the people a semblance of commitment, a semblance of seriousness, a semblance of popularity, a semblance of followership. And that's exactly what we're contending with. Therefore, when you look at the core of the question, besides Tinubu, who else is likely to be president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria come 2027? And the simple answer is any other person can be, because we have a president who has failed largely, and we have an opposition that must rise up to the urgency of now. The reality is that if we have a credible opposition, if we have a movement that connects with the people effectively, if we have a political class that rather than agonizing decides to organize to make our country better, then whoever champions that movement is definitely going to be sworn in as President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria come May 29th, 2027. So I do sincerely think that if there's anybody who is the chief campaigner for the next president, it is President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and his party. A party that has failed largely, failed on account of security, failed on account of the economy, failed in education, failed in national security, failed in just about everything but propaganda, in just about anything but debauchery, in just about anything but delusional propaganda. That government is very unlikely to win a second term. So I think, and that's why I agree with those who are critical of government, that this government is definitely going to be a one-term presidency. And whoever is ready, willing, competent, able, and progressively and proactively connects with the people, come 2027, will definitely win the presidency.
Whoa, fantastic, Professor. This is interesting. Having said all that you just said, Professor, there is a huge coalition going on right now in Nigeria, and heads of parties are coming together to see how they could topple the present-day leadership. Do you think this coalition can hold water in the light of the forces of the present-day administration?
Interestingly, the emergent coalition, that's what I call it, the coalition of political forces and interests, is almost as successful as what you can imagine for three reasons. The first is that a largely failing incumbent makes it imperative for forces motivated by the people, mark my choice of words, forces and interests engineered and encouraged by the people to rise. And these forces invariably grows life through the recruitment of political tendencies. That is why, as you and I talk, you have a Rotimi Amechi, you have a Peter Obi, you have and Atiku Abubakar, you have Nasir El-Rufai, you have Rauf Arebushala, you have yours sincerely, Professor Chris Mustafa Nwaokobia Jr., and several other persons coalescing into forming a formidable coalition. And what is important as we move on is the fact that the emergent coalition is simply not about individual political interests. It's about the redemption of our country. It's about taking back our country for good. It's about putting effective, efficient, and effectual message of redemption before our people. You cannot oblige a government that has failed in almost every respect. And I'm speaking seriously. On the one hand, you hear them tell you about projects that they are commissioning. And on the other hand, you find out that this is a government superintended by a man who told us, even whilst he was governor of Lagos State, that what you need to move Nigeria forward is restructuring through fiscal federalism, devolution of power, and an amendment, a holistic amendment of our constitution. Unfortunately, now that he has power, now that he should lead that effort, because he has control, nobody's talking about that now. And so I think that moving Nigeria forward, we must tell ourselves the truth. You know, the Holy Book will say that ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. And then one of my most interesting quotes by a wise sage, Sir Walter Scott. He said a long time ago, oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. Almost every day, when you talk about our politics and what I'd love to call our politics, because those who pretend our political space are very unmindful of truth, very unmindful of commitment to the common good, very unmindful of making our country work for the good of all. And for them, their philosophy in leadership is me, myself, and I. They care about nobody but themselves and their politics. But I tell you that every nation comes to that point where there must be a transformation of ideals, a transformation of values, a transformation of psychology, a transformation of ideology. And these are fundamental issues, whether we like it or not. You know, my late dad told me a long time ago that there comes a time in the life of a people and a nation where nature says enough. And that's the point where we are, where Nigerians and indeed nature is saying enough. Enough of the perfidy of the political class. Enough of the deceit of the political class. Enough of telling Nigerians to tighten their seatbelt when your belt is wide loose, when you're engaged in wanderlust, thievery, when you're engaged in larceny and malfeasance, when you do not care about our country, when you're involved in waste, profligacy, and wanderlust, and you're telling the people to tighten their seatbelt. This government came into power telling us that we didn't have money. They spent 21 billion building a house for the vice president. They spent over $100 million buying an aircraft for Mr. President. They spent 150 million naira each buying cars for lawmakers. This is the most profligate administration. You can't on the one hand tell the people that this country is poor, and you're spending money like a Santa Claus. You're spending money like naira was going out of fashion. That's how bad and unreal, untrue, and lacking of seriousness and commitment to the common good that this administration is. So I think that the challenge for a coalition that works has been made imperative and inevitable by the present government. And the effort to make the coalition a huge success is propelled by the masses of the people who are saying never ever again, who are saying enough of this debauchery. So I think that confidently with the people involved in the emergent coalition, confidently with their commitment, confidently with their passion, confidently with their patriotic flair and zeal, confidently with the zest that drives all of us, we shall have a coalition that will not only sack the present government come 2027, but set Nigeria on the path to greatness. Because beyond what this government celebrates, what is at the core is that this nation is restructuring, re-engineering, resetting, and we need an ideal programmatic that puts the people first.
Thank you very much, Professor. Talking about Africa and Nigeria being the giant of Africa. Quickly, before we go on with the other questions, can you just quickly tell us, where do you see Nigeria in the next 10 years?
Nigeria in 10 years. I believe in Nigeria so much so that I think that I see in Nigeria that would begin its journey to ideal greatness in the next 48 months. I think that, and I believe so, that if Nigerians across the world are just about the best brains that you have, and here I'm speaking passionately, the most intelligent, the most progressive and proactive immigrant community in the United States of America, for instance, is not the Jews, is not the Hispanics, is not the Asians, is not the Aborigines or the people you call the Rendidians. The most lettered, the most progressive, the most proactive, and most engaging immigrant community in the United States of America is the Nigerian community. And so, across Europe, Nigerians are breaking bounds and creating new records and breaking barriers. So if Nigerians are able to do that across the world, I'm confident that if we have a leadership that is responsible and responsive to the people, that if we have a leadership that cares about the green, white, green, that if we have a leadership that cares about the masses of our people and about excellence over and above ethnicity, that cares about our country and cares about productivity over consumption, if we have a leadership that is committed to building and engaging our people progressively and proactively, the Nigerian diaspora will return and things will begin to turn for the better, very effectively so. And that's why I'm confident that fixing Nigeria is not rocket science. That's why I'm confident that should we have an effective, efficient, and effectual leader come 2027, the journey to the new republic would have begun. And God forbid that we continue with an administration that continues to lie to the people, albeit consistently. God forbid that we continue with those whose message in leadership is more about propaganda than performance. God forbid that we continue with a leadership that is interested in me, myself, and I, or interested in ethnicity, nepotistic tendencies and cronyism. God forbid that we continue with that administration. And I also pray that, unlike what happened in 2015 when we thought that with Buhari we're going to set our country on a steady track to greatness, God forbid that we make the mistakes that we made in 2015. I am confident that if we begin with a leader that is committed to our collective good, a leader that is detribalized, a leader that is patriotic, a leader that cares about the good of you and I. If we have that leader who believes in the new republic, who believes in patriotism, if we have that leader who sees the Nigerian estate as a collective estate, a collective patrimony, if we have that kind of leader, our journey to greatness won't take 10 years. It will begin immediately after the handover come 2027. So I am sure that our country will not only come through the bend and come through the bend greatly, our country will come alive wonderfully. And our country will not only be great, but lead Africa away from poverty, disease, despondency, and want, but lead Africa away from complex issues to stunning comparative growth, and lead Africa to that place where this great continent becomes the leader of the new world.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your contribution. And again, is Nigeria going to get change through the ballot box? Or is it going to be a peaceful revolution? Which one is it going to be?
I think that if you allow me the opportunity to reframe and rephrase that question, I would say, can we have a people's revolution through the ballot box? Because I think that going forward, what is important for us as a people is a masses-oriented revolution, albeit peaceful, where the people understand that the power of the people is greater than the power of those in power, where people understand that if they were able to use their tongue, that the ballot is stronger than the bullet, where people will understand that if they collectively say no to the ruts of years and decades and effectively galvanize and mobilize to the ballot come 2027 and vote the best of the candidates, then our journey to the new republic would have begun. I think that sincerely, our country can get it right. I believe very passionately that this country of 250 million people, with about 90 million registered voters, can overturn the perfidy and the deceit of less than 1% of Nigerians who politic on the political space. I am confident that what is necessary to move this country forward is a people's awareness of the urgency of now, an understanding that democracy as defined by the schoolboy is the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And so if we must move this country forward, then we must internalize these values and ideals. We must march together, work together, think together, and understand that beyond political enunciations, beyond propaganda, beyond partisanship, what counts is how the country works for the good of a greater number. And if this present administration is not living true to that reality, the onus and the challenges on the Nigerian people and indeed the opposition to galvanize and mobilize to transform our country through and with the power of a ballot over and above a bullet. A masses-oriented ballot-based revolution is imperative, is a necessary way out of the morass. And I believe that come 2027, if we mobilize and organize rather than agonize, we shall have that revolution, and through the power of a ballot in 2027, transform the jangling discord of our nation into a beautiful symphony of progress, progressivism, and greatness.
Wow, Professor, that is one sure thing I enjoy about your analysis. Would you say Nigeria is a democratic state, or we are running elections just to legitimize elite control in this country?
I think that's a very smart question. Let me say without equivocation that the greatest challenge before us as a people is the fact that we oftentimes romanticize the truth. We refuse to stick to the truth. Since 1999, what we have had at best is civil rule. The democracy is simply defined by the schoolboy as a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And tied to a democratic rule is the transparency of the electoral process. If your electoral process is largely adjudged as unfair, as not transparent, as not free, and as not credible, then you have a problem. You cannot say that what you have is democracy. And so the second leg of that question suggests that what we have every 4 years is an electoral process that seeks to legitimize the control of the elites over our collective space. And so what is important going forward is that our people must begin to rise up, speak truth to power, agitate and organize, and demand that forthwith the electoral umpire, in the case of our national elections, INEC, in the case of our state elections, SEC, the State Independent Electoral Commission, that these organs created by law to superintend and oversee elections in our country conduct free, fair, and credible elections. It bothers the carapace of my mind to think of the fact that what we had in June 12, 1993 is still adjudged the freest and the fairest election in our nation's history. Whereas, since we got back to democracy in 1999, we've had several elections. We had elections in 2003, in 2007, in 2011, in 2015, in 2019, and in 2023. In all these elections, about 5 or 6 of them have been largely flawed. And so the question is, when are we as a people truly ready for democracy? Because like I said, congruent with democratic etiquettes and values is the transparency of the electoral process, is the freeness of the electoral process, is the fairness of the electoral process, and the credibility of the electoral process. And what we have had after successive elections is electoral umpires and those who superintend the elections being lampooned as having allowed electoral larceny and malfeasance to denominate or determine the elections. Going forward, what we must do as a people is push for the amendment of the Electoral Act, ask for the minimums, which is that there is premium time transmission of election results from the election centers, the election units, rather than this situation where after elections, ballot papers and election materials are transported to collation centers. Election results must be transmitted from the voting wards, the units, so the IRF. That way, we're able to reduce the tampering of election results. That way, we're able to reduce rigging of election results. And that way, we're able to etch stronger values in our democracy. That way, we're able to stay close to the minimums expected or required of a democracy. So I believe that it's a work in progress. I believe that our people must organize rather than agonize. I believe that our people must begin to ask strong questions, and we must, away from partisanship, learn to call a spade by its name. We're yet to reach the doorsteps of what you call true democracy, but together as a people, we can challenge for it, work for it, fight for it, ask for it, organize for it, and vote for it.
Professor, thank you very much. And again, Professor, I would like to ask this question honestly. Is Nigerian democracy an anti-youth setup? Because we have over 70% of Nigerian population is below the age of 30. I mean, we have a huge demography that are youths in the country. Then the electoral circle keep featuring old faces. Atiku want to come on board. Who knows, Obasanjo or Peter Obi, even though youths rallied around him the last time, some of us think he's a little bit too old for the age of AI. Is Nigerian democracy an anti-youth setup, or what is really the issue? Why do we keep recycling old people in our political circle?
No, I think that regarding the seeming nostalgia, the seeming apathy of our young people participating in the electoral process, participating in the electioneering process, participating in elections for the purposes of either going to the National Assembly, State Assembly, or the presidency. The seeming lethargy, the seeming nostalgia, the seeming difficulty is perhaps the fault, number one, of the parties, number two, the electoral act, and number three, the failure of the young people to organize effectively. And I'd explain this before I blame the media, because the media has a role to play in this whole process. Political parties charge humongous amounts for funds. You want to emerge a councillor, in some parties you have to pay as much as 500,000. And so many of our young people are unemployed. So many of our young people do not have such monies. Then if you want to go to the National Assembly, about some parties ask for as much as 2 million for House of Reps, some ask for much as 5 million. And where are these young people going to get it from? So I think that the parties largely are unfair to young people. The Electoral Act also doesn't seem to regulate the parties enough to ensure that party candidacy forms, declaration of interest forms, and forms for aspirants are not used as a means of raising resources by the political parties. I expect that parties should allow young people to pick their tickets almost for free, because in democracy, the freedoms to determine or decide who governs you should be expanded. And here I'm speaking deeply. If you have a young man in a constituency who is very popular, who is seen as caring and concerned about how the society progresses, but does not have money to buy a form, it means that the people are shortchanged, because otherwise they would want that young man as a member of the House of Reps or a member of the House of Assembly. But because this young man doesn't have the resources, and because the society is largely poor, they are also unable to raise resources for him to buy the forms. So what clearly is the problem is the fact that there is a disconnect between the political parties and the reality on the ground. There is also a failure of the electoral umpire to ensure that the minimums in terms of party fundings, the maximums in terms of campaign fundings are strictly adhered to. I'm saying this advisedly because if we truly want to remove our country from poverty, from disease, despondency, and decay, we must inspire our young people to dare to run. We must inspire our young people to participate in the electoral process. We must challenge Generation Next to bring to bear their abilities and their capacities in the process of governance. So I want to say that largely the political space is very unfriendly to our youths, and largely also the political parties are unfriendly to the young people and women. And going forward, our young people must learn to organize and demand from the political parties equal rights in terms of their ability to get access to nomination forms and declaration of interest forms, and to participate in the electoral process. And then interestingly, one situation, one reality that bothers the carapace of our mind is the fact that you wonder why our terrestrial press, our news mediums, when they have issues to discuss, they go for old men who should be retired. And so there's this seeming air that labels our young people as incompetent. You want to discuss global affairs, And you go to a Professor Bolaji Akiyemi, who's practically very old and should be retired, whereas there are young people who understand and who are in tandem with global realities. You want to discuss issues about diplomacy, you go for a Joe Keshi, who should be retired and resting. Where are the young people, the young professors, the young doctors across our country who are excelling in their fields? So the media also shares a part in the failure to inspire our young people to dare. I think that going forward, we must do as a nation. It's like obtains in every other clime. In Europe, young women and young men are coming up to leadership. In the Americas, the same thing. People are spurring and urging and nudging young people to come to the political theater and show what they've got. I think that going forward, Nigeria must encourage our young people, must encourage the youth to effectively participate in the political process. You want to talk about global politics, there are a lot of young people who have done well and who travel and live across the world. There are people who can discuss commerce and economics. Some are in government, some are out of government. We have young people who understand global politics. They lived in different parts of the world. They can effectively discuss these issues. I have a brother and a friend. Unfortunately, people tend to see him as critical of government. He's lived overseas. He's running a media outfit in the United States, and his media house is grossing over 1 million daily readers. Showrare of Sahara Reporters, he's there. You have, although he's in government, he's smart in economics, Tokwe Fashua is there. You have some young man who's doing extremely well in discussing global economic issues and issues that pertains to Nigeria. It's Kelvin Emmanuel, he's there. You have yours sincerely, with all sense of respect, versatile in issues of law and international politics. You have a lot of young people who are doing well in their different fields, young men and young women. And I think that the onus is on the media to go in search of these people rather than bother our big brother and Egbo, Professor Bolaji Akiyemi, when she should be resting, rather than bother our Egbo and big brother Ambassador Joe Keshi when he should be resting. We have a lot of the intellectual sea of this country is replete with intellectual sharks and dolphins who will do profoundly well in discussing issues and turning our country right around. So the media must change the narrative and engage with these young people and show the world that our young people are smart, our young people are engaging, and our young people are intelligent.
Thank you very much, Professor. Many say our leaders are not the problem, and that the people who vote them in are, and that Nigerians are co-author of their own suffering. Professor, do you agree to that?
I have fought with several people who import that phraseology that the people are as good as the leaders they have, and vice versa. I fought those who assume that the failure largely is that of followership. And I want to start this didactic effort in repositioning our collective thought from a phraseology from the Orients. The Japanese will say that leadership is top to bottom. The Caucasians will say that in a family, that the parents must show the way. And then a popular American politician who ran for presidency said without equivocation that leadership must show the way. I disagree with those who try and attempt to put the challenge and the responsibility at the doorstep of the people. My late father told me something, and it stuck to me deeply. He said that it will be unfair to a prostitute when you come to her house and you take her 18-year-old daughter for a virginity test. He also told me that it will be unfair to that robber in the neighborhood when you come to his 20-year-old son and ask him to be as pious as a pope. All he has known is a father who steals. All the daughter has known is a mother who moves from one man to the other to get by. And so what we must do is encourage leadership to show the way. What we must do is to challenge leadership to show the way. That's why we have leaders. We do not have leaders for the followers to show them the way. What's the word leadership? Lead. By example, lead following due process and the rule of law. And, let me say this very interestingly, that I helped in getting Buhari to power in 2015. And the reason I left the APC and began to fight them was when the former Minister of Information, Egbor Lai Mohammed, launched a project he called Change Begins With You. And I said, no, that wasn't the promise we made the Nigerian people. We made a promise to the Nigerian people that we were going to be the change they wanted. And all over the world, it's happening in Rwanda, it's happening in Burkina Faso, it's happening in Senegal and across the world. Leaders show the way. Leaders guide the people. Leaders direct societal temperament and emotions. And leaders weave the collective ideals and ideology of a nation. Very unfortunately, because in this climate, people are lazy at thinking, they shift the responsibility from the leaders, or they attempt to shift responsibility from the leaders to the followers. I also want to say without equivocation that, yes, there's a part of responsibility. If leaders refuse to do right, there is a call for citizen action. It could come in the way of marches, it could come in the way of protests, it could come in the way of picketing. It could also come in the way of concerted defiance against bad leadership. But we must take note and define these normatives. Leadership must show the way. Followership must demand responsible and responsive action from leaders. That is the responsibility of followership. But leadership must at all times lead the way. And I believe that in the course of this interview, I've said without equivocation that it is necessary for the people to learn to organize rather than agonize. The time has come for us to gather at that parlor where every parlor's tendencies that holds us down is trumped, where every parlor's tendencies that holds the nation down is torpedoed, where every parlor's tendencies that holds our country to the cesspool of want, despondency, and defeat is trumped by a collective reaction by the people. Citizen action is necessary to make leadership do right. And I believe going forward that we must be clear-headed enough to demand that leaders be responsible and responsive to the people. And those who must seek leadership positions must understand that congruent with leadership position is the right to show the way to the new republic, is the right to show the way to the beloved society, and is a right to make governance responsible and responsive to the people.
Thank you very much, Professor, on the State of the Nation's broadcast today. You are just a fantastic contributor, and you have contributed to the Nigerian space with your great idea, perspectives, and insight. And would love to keep having you on One Voice Africa Television as we sensitize the citizens of Africa to take leadership and responsibility over their nation and community. Your final thought before we close for the day, because our time is running out and we love to hear your final thought, Prof.
Every so often we talk about our country and the way out of the morass. There's a collective challenge by Nigerians to do right. There's also that collective challenge to believe in our country. We must dedicate ourselves to the task of nation building. We must give our best to making our country work. And that is our honorable commitment. We must give our best to nation. My name is Professor Chris Mustafa Nwaokobia Jr. And this is one of my commitments to nation building and putting our country right. And this is my invitation to all of you to stay tuned and always watch One Voice Africa TV. This is the target. This is the cross. This is the motivation for the country that we all seek. We must say the truth, speak the truth. And like I said, the good book says that ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. And so with One Voice Africa is the truth, devoid of propaganda. Is the truth devoid of falsehood. Is the truth as it is. Always seek to be properly informed by tuning to One Voice Africa TV. God bless you. God bless Nigeria. And God bless our dear continent, Africa. One love.